Ah, maybe I should test my hair first. God, my hair is terrible. What the fuck? The lighting's terrible. Um, I hope so too. I'm not the only historian. Can you hear me? By any curious? How's the nightly lady? Can you hear me? No problems. Happy days. Yeah, I know, and I'm not the only one. There's a load of YouTubers getting demonetized lately, and it's down to a lot of them are saying it's the AI. AI is like doing a lot of people stupid. Like the only thing that works is Patreon. Patreon really is the only thing that works right now, especially if you're doing anything medieval. Patreon, 100%. I think that's been a problem for a while. Is that the medieval community, the entire medieval community, has been bounced for ages because they say one thing. Anyone from the medieval community says anything, and that's it. We straight away get demonetized, and we have to rely on Patreon for pretty much our wage. Like, let me see if I can get that lighting better. Whoa. Yeah, I think that's better than what it was. My hair is wild. Is it a political thing? Sort of. Like it's all the big wigs at the top, all the companies that like support everything. They don't really care about like education or anything. They only care about like making easy money. So it is sort of a political thing at the top. Um, yeah, still in Asia. I woke up in Japan this morning for sure. I do plan on being in Japan for a while because of the housing crisis back in Ireland. So I'm gonna wait for that to somewhat settle down, if it does settle down, and then maybe move back to Europe, or go for wherever after that. Because stuff over here is starting to heat up as well between you know who in Japan and America as well. So I'll see. How's my hair doing? I literally rolled out of bed this morning. Yeah, everybody's saying the housing crisis is so bad. Me and my wife only just got really lucky, because what happened is that we had coronavirus that kicked off, and I was doing tourism, and my wife was doing archaeology. And when the coronavirus kicked in, that was it. That was our work wiped out of it. Um, So myself and the wife, lucky the wife actually got work in Japan because my wife is actually Japanese, and so the two of us just abandoned ship and jumped over to Japan, which is great and everything because there's like we end up getting work in Okinawa, so I can do like karate and stuff because this is Karate Island and it's not far from China, but it's trying to get money out here. It's like when I first came here, I felt like, oh, I'm a billionaire because the euro was worth so much here. It's crazy. Like everybody's coming on holidays to Japan because you can buy so much stuff. But the wage you earn here, it's terrible. Like trying to earn money here is so difficult. Like Dutch. Not that I know of. I recently did my DNA, and I think I've got like a bit of French, a bit of English. Definitely have Irish on me. My mother did her DNA testing, and she was almost 100% Irish because she's from Sligo, and her DNA was like I think it was like 10% Polish or something. It was something wild, just completely out there. So there was like a small bit of Eastern European in her. My dad was made up of because my dad is from like the Limerick Cork area, so he was what was it, a good 60-70% Irish, and then the rest of his DNA was like English, French, that whole kind of click there, like so you know his background straight away, like, and he's a Hayes, which is like O'Hairda. But yeah, you know straight away it was all the Norman invaders and stuff that influenced that DNA, like. It sounds like a wee bit of an adventure. Yeah, it has been. Which when I was living in Ireland, I was kind of doing anyway because I was doing the living history pretty much every year. So I end up like traveling most of Ireland, doing all the living history shows. Because I was in Whitehorse living history. So like pretty much every weekend, I was doing the early medieval living history. So I was pretty much dressing up as a Viking and then going to all the shows. So we pretty much would start off around the Cork area, and then halfway in, I'd go up to Dublin to meet up with Fingal Living History Group. And then from Fingal, I would make my way up north to do Portadown and all those shows as well. And then I would end up around the Galway area because they would have the armored combat and stuff. Always wanted to do the late medieval stuff as well. And then you had Craganoan and stuff as well with Moratti Castle. So we ended up doing shows up around there as well. So pretty much every year I end up pretty much traveling all of Ireland. Wicklow in the house. Oh yeah. Have you seen my last video on the Gaelic resurgence from 1370 to 1420? Where you have all those missing people up in Wicklow Mountains? Because my last video I was covering the what was it, the Gaelic resurgence, where the English had invaded. They have two invasions, but the second invasion, Arc MacMurrough Kavanagh kind of leads them up the Wicklow Mountains, where he pretty much makes them disappear. Like a lot of people have disappeared up in the Wicklow Mountains. Burns. I dated a girl who was no Burn. She was like half Spanish, half from like the Wicklow Kildare area, and yeah, she was really really awesome, really fun. But God, her attitude would change so quickly. Like, um, yeah, a lot of people have gone missing in the Wicklow Mountains. And they had that your manor who was going around. What was it? Only 30 years ago or so, wasn't it? Um, can't remember his bloody name. Probably can't even say it on YouTube. Probably get my whole channel torn down. But yeah, he was going around making women disappear, and he went to the court system and stuff. And although he was in the middle, when they caught him, he was in the middle of making a girl disappear. They were like, oh, well, that's not enough evidence. So they let him go. And he ends up going to Europe and meeting up with another person that makes people disappear. And the two of them now were traveling around. Yeah. That's him, Larry Murphy. Yeah. They just let him scot free. That was wild. I can't believe that. Like, and what was it? My wife. So they wanted to do archaeology up in the Wicklow Mountains, and the guards will not let you do any form of archaeology up in the Wicklow Mountains because of the amount of missing people, not just from Larry himself, but also because of all the troubles that happened. So anytime in between what was it, 1969 up to yeah, he's up in Amsterdam now, making people disappear there too. So between 1969 to 1998, anytime they needed someone to go missing up in the north, they would just bring them to the Wicklow Mountains. So now, because there's loads of archaeology that needs to get done up in the Wicklow Mountains, now the guards completely refuse to let anyone do any form of archaeology up in the Wicklow Mountains because of the amount of missing people. Because the guards don't want to do any of the paperwork, none. Um, What was it called? Early medieval history, up around your area, Nightly Lady. The early medieval stuff is absolutely amazing. Who else sells that? Because there's a few Vikings that settle around your area. And start harassing England and the French. Because I think the problem is with the Holy Roman Empire, isn't it? You can't, like, at the time, which was France, wasn't it? The Early Roman Empire, led by the French at the time, with Charlemagne's court, they could not pin down Viking raids at all. Like, so I think a lot of them end up settling around that area. Obviously, most famously is Normandy. Like, oh, I don't think I know them. I'll have to go and research them. Max Shanes. I don't know them. Give me a second. Can I copy and paste that? No, oh, wait. World. Let me see. Dun, 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 bum, 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 bum. Oh, Hugh McShane O'Neill. Which one was he again? Was he your one that got? No, he was during the 9 Years' War. Um, yeah, it's all that stuff to do with the 9 Years' War. I'll have to be careful with the 9 Years' War because anytime someone gets anything wrong with the 9 Years' War, academics are just like rah, 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 rah. So if I do anything to do with the 9 Years' War, it has to be like perfect because it's okay to annoy like people that don't know any better. Because there's that argument right now. I keep getting messaged by people who tell me, "Oh, it's not. What was it? Anglo-Irish. It's Hiberno-Norman." I'm like, but it is Anglo-Irish because by the time you get up to the 15th century, most of the nobles that are living in the southeast of the country are both married into the Gaelic or in the northwest of the country, and they're also married into the English nobility. But that seems to like really annoy people for some reason. I don't know why. But when it comes down to the 9 Years' War, you really need to make sure that's all perfect. Yeah, exactly. The Old English. It's like these people are completely. And what was I woke up this morning and somebody told me it was like, well, if you did a little bit more reading, you'd understand that it's Hiberno-Norman. And I'm like, if you did a tiny bit more reading, you'd literally discover that word, Old English. That's bang on right. It is Old English because they have a transition period because they come in, they're Normans. Well, there's an argument right now that they were actually English by the time they got to Ireland because it was that transition period anyway. But they hop over to Ireland, and I consider them Normans because it also makes it easier for a conversation, which is the Cambro Normans and the Anglo Normans. The first wave was the Cambro Normans that came in with Strongbow, and the second wave that came in with Henry II was the Anglo Normans. And what was it? So they fight for a bit. And then you've got Henry III that takes over after you have all this anarchy that kicks off. And he starts to identify this whole kind of idea of what it is to be English. Not quite yet. You don't really get the modern idea of what it is to be English until the 15th century in England with Henry V. But anyway, between the jigs and the reels, during the 13th century, when you have Henry III, you have very much an English side and a Gaelic side. So you do get the feeling of England versus Ireland to a certain degree. You still have barons fighting barons as well, because the magic of the 13th century is you have baron wars that are kicking off from Ireland all the way to Germany, where if you have a baron that looks at another baron half crooked, they will fight each other over whatever as an excuse to rob more land. So Ireland at the time, because Henry III, although he's a terrible king, starts to bring down the idea of what it is to be English. But you also have the barons, the Norman barons are also marrying into English people and Irish people. So they're getting less identified as Normans from Normandy, especially when they're going into the likes of the 100 Years' War, and they're getting more associated with living between the English world and the Irish world. Um, yeah, the Geraldinis are a very, very good example. The Fitzgeralds, but the Fitzgeralds are a funny one because the Fitzgeralds also identify as Florentine, because they rock up to the Irish Parliament. Where was it? Around between 1420. What was it? Thomas Fitzgerald. Is it Thomas? No, James Fitzgerald, the usurper. He rocks up in the what was it? The Irish Parliament one day, and he declares that he is Florentine, and he actually has this guy called John of the Geraldini from Florence who rocks up one day, and he's ready to what was it, trade silk and wool and all that kind of stuff from Florence to Ireland. It's also interesting as well because the Florence at the time is a republic, and the Irish Parliament is having a disagreement with the King of England, and that's why you've got the because at the time both the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds were going against Talbot, who was the English representative in Ireland. So both the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds kind of go kind of like mostly independent, but still somewhat semi-independent with the English crown. And that's why you've got like just the Pale up in the top. So they just somewhat cut their ties with England, and Fitzgerald starts trading with Florentini, and because of that, he identifies as from Florence. Right, where am I with the questions? Strongbow was the man. He was a funny character. I do wonder if he had rebelled against Henry II. He probably would have ended up being sandwiched between the O'Connors and the English. But if he was victorious in all of that, I wonder what kind of Norman Irish king he would have been like. I reckon, man. Jameson's a Viking name? I actually didn't know that. Jameson. I'm gonna have to look that up. My wife, when she was living in Ireland, because she spent most of her childhood and her teens in Ireland, that's why she's got a really thick Middleton accent. But she lived right next to the Jamesons. What was it? Whiskey place. You know where they make the whiskey, and she used to, when she was a teenager, herself and her friend from the Philippines used to hop over the wall and go exploring. Mm. Yeah, the Fitzgeralds were crowned the what was it? The kings of the uncrowned kings of Ireland. It was, who was it again? Because Thomas Fitzgerald ended up getting, oh, wasn't it Garrod Fitzgerald? I think it was the ninth or tenth Earl of Kildare. They pretty much became dominant after Thomas Fitzgerald was decapitated by the English. And then they led, it was Garrod, I'm sure it was Garrod Fitzgerald, that led an invasion of the north of England, which technically speaking is the last battle of the Wars of the Roses. The English like to pretend Bosworth is the last battle of the War of the Roses, but it's actually the Battle of Stokefield is the last battle of the War of the Roses, and it's an Irish invasion of England, and their plan is to get a nice little puppet and crown him King of England, because at the time the Tudors were quite weak. But I think it's early on in the battle, the Irish get quite unlucky because they put their cairns on a hill. They try to take as much land as quick as they can, and the English longbowmen end up shooting down all the cairns, because the cairns, although they're really, really fast on their feet, and then they jump onto the hobble of horses to get around the battlefield very, very fast. They don't wear any armor, And the reason why they don't wear any armor, allegedly, is because they're trying to be like connected with their Fenian past. So they're exceptionally good at their martial arts. But when it comes down to actually holding the line, they're terrible. They're absolutely terrible. That's why the Gallowglass most of the time were holding the line. But for the Battle of Stokefield, the Irish actually had German mercenaries to hold the line for them with their pikes, but we still lost. Where am I with these questions? But most people take it as real history is just a shame. But yeah, people like to make up their own history all the time, especially like I don't want to putting down Irish history, but especially with our tour guides and everything, we just make up history like all the time. But our academics are very good though. Like anytime you're not sure, just get an actual history book from an actual academic from a university, and they should normally keep you in line. Our academics are very, very good. I think a lot of our modern history, just like any other country, is a bit funny. But when it comes down to medieval history in Ireland, I think our academics are very, very good. They're constantly getting through the landmines of the politics that's happening in university, and there's a lot of politics happening in universities right now. But our lecturers are just so good, and they're so good at getting around the landmines. So Irish history right now still hasn't really been bogged down by modern politics the way it is in England. England is getting very, very bad with the old modern politics. Like they're changing the names of courses and everything to be more kind of accepting. But then sometimes when they do make a change, like they made a change recently from the Anglo-Saxon course to the early medieval course. And the reason for that is so they can cover more of a broad range. And you had a lot of conservative people who were so angry about it. And then on the flip side, that it was the same course as well. You had people that wanted the course completely removed because they found it offensive. So the early medieval studies in England is getting a right bashing right now. Too many people having too much of a political say on medieval stuff it's not good. Like the Desmond Fitzgeralds, yeah, you have got two branches, and I apologize if if I'm confusing anyone, because I am switching between the two branches of the Kildare Fitzgeralds and the Desmond Fitzgeralds. They're very close. So sometimes are not so close, because sometimes the Kildare Fitzgeralds will marry into the Butlers and fight back against the Desmond Fitzgeralds, but that only happens, it very rarely happens, and it just doesn't happen during the Wars of the Roses. The Wars of the Roses, the Kildare Fitzgeralds and the Desmond Fitzgeralds are like this, and the Kildare Fitzgeralds pretty much take over what the Desmond Fitzgeralds were doing when Thomas Fitzgerald gets his head cut off. You have to draw pictures of Aoife and Strongbow getting married every Christmas. That's interesting. I'd love to see some of that, like see what people's interpretation of it is. I think the modern interpretation that we have is that painting that's very much a late medieval painting, because they all have the full plate armor and stuff on it. It's a pretty awesome painting and everything, but yeah, it's very inaccurate, because I think some of them are actually in Cherbourg armor. Well, influences of Cherbourg armor. Desmond, Ormond, and Thomas, the kings of Munster. So were they Normans? Were they Normans? They started off as Cambro-Normans and Anglo-Normans. There's an argument right now, and I still haven't read it, that they were pretty much English by the time they got to Ireland. But I haven't read this year's argument on it, and there's two books this year, which is called, one is called The English Invasion of Ireland, and the second one is called Invasion 1169. And I haven't read either one of them, so I don't know if you should be calling them Normans. But regardless, for the time being, to stop people getting confused, I'm calling Strongbow's lot the Cambro-Normans, and Henry II, which was the second wave that came in 1171, I'm calling them the Anglo-Normans. So you had the Cambro-Normans that came in from Wales, and they mostly settle around where I live, from around the Cork, Mallow, and the Limerick area. And then you have the second wave that comes in with the Anglo-Normans, and they mostly settle in the lordship of Ireland, which was owned by Henry II, and then mostly transfers over. And then even on top of that, the English monarchy kind of like trade and argue over that little bit of land in Leinster for a good while. And then you have the MacMurroghs who are stuck in the middle of that, who always plan to be loyal to the English crown, but then they get treated terribly and end up rebelling. And they're like the biggest rebels of the whole lot of them. But what happens is that for the next 300 years, they more and more they disconnect themselves from Normandy, which is, you know, in particular the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds. But the Butlers and Fitzgeralds, they mostly marry into the English families and also the Irish families. So you'll see if you look at their list of names and see who they marry, you'll have them marrying like the O'Donnells, the O'Neills, the O'Connors, and then suddenly you'll get like a random English name. You follow the English name down, and it's like this big, very rich family at the time in England. So they are going between the two realms, and it's not even a case of, so at this period when going from the 11th century all the way to the 15th century, what you have is this period where they're more and more getting involved, less with Normandy and more with um, the English realm and the Irish realm. So the Irish world mostly being from the northwest side. So they're pretty much in between. And even if you read the annals at the time even recognize this. So you'll have various annals, and they'll turn around and they refer to themselves as the native Irish, the Gaelic. They refer to the English in England as English. But then they have this other group in between, the Fitzgeralds and the Butlers, and they're just like, well, foreigners. They're foreigners. They're not us. They're not English. They're just foreigners. But it's funny because if you read letters in the 15th century between the English and the likes of the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds, they consider themselves Irish. So at the time in the 15th century, they'll consider themselves Irish, but then later on, they'll consider themselves, when you're going into like the 17th century and stuff, they'll consider themselves the Old English. So the English in England are the New English, the new settlers. The old settlers are considered the Old English, and obviously the Gaelic, the Irish, and eventually they all become Irish, because everyone eventually gets sick of English rule in Ireland, and the English just don't understand. Like the English in the English Parliament, the British in the British Parliament, they just can't understand why people in Ireland don't like the fact that they're lacking food, taxes are too high, and most of their children have to be sent off to foreign wars. Like the British Parliament doesn't understand this. Like, what's there not to like? It's the same with the Ottomans. The Ottomans look at the Balkans and they go, "Your first child is taken away. Like, why are you rebelling? Isn't this a great thing? Like, I can't see what the problem is. First children are always the loudest. Why can't you kind of take them away? Like, um, I don't know. I'm as baffled as the British Parliament why the Irish don't like British rule. Um, doo, doo, doo. KO, the Butlers, Ormonds. Ah, yes, the Butlers of Ormond. And the Desmonds, right? From Wexford. Oh, yeah, I already did all that stuff. Tormans. The Tormans were, what was it called? The O'Briens. Were the O'Briens Anglo-Irish? I wouldn't consider them Anglo-Irish because they're Gaelic, and no one's ever turned around and said that they're Anglo-Irish. Um, so the Tomans, I'm butchering that word. It's too early in the morning. The O'Briens, I would put them on the Gaelic side, but in reality they're kind of funny as well. But they still mostly marry inside of the Gaelic communities. So although they marry the likes of the Butlers and the Fitzgeralds, they're very Irish Butlers and Fitzgeralds, and they also marry into the O'Neills, the O'Donnells, and the O'Carrolls and stuff. So I would consider the likes of the McCarthy's and the O'Briens. Even later on, I would still put them in the category of Gaelic. Um, so yeah. Hopefully you do learn something. The Kerns. Yeah, the Waterford council, they've put like a lot of money into Vikings, the early medieval period, and they're making the money back. There's a lot of tourism going into Waterford, and now they've become overprotective of it. When I was in Cork, they wrote a letter from Waterford to Cork, basically telling Cork to stop doing Viking stuff, because they wanted to pretty much monopolize the Viking stuff that was going on in Waterford. And obviously, their biggest rivals is Dublin. Dublin, with the Living History Group, Fingal, are their biggest rivals, and they're making a lot of money as well with all the Viking stuff. So obviously Waterford wouldn't like Cork doing Viking stuff, but I don't. Cork doesn't need to do Viking stuff. Cork should do more late medieval stuff. It's the late medieval period when Cork really becomes alive, especially during the period of the Wars of the Roses. That's where Cork actually gets its name, the Rebel County, when they decide to support. Who was the pretender? There was a pretender who came into Cork. I can't remember his bloody name right now, but they support him against the Tudors, and they support the invasion of England, which ends up leading to the mayor of Cork being hung by the Tudors, because the Tudors eventually capture him, and they had him hung. Um, so Cork shouldn't really. I know the foundation of Cork is the early medieval period, but they should focus on the late medieval period. I think there's way more money to be made, especially with the likes of Clare Galway and that whole area doing a bit of it. But Cork could do a way bigger late medieval festival, especially when they have Elizabeth's Fort and stuff to work with. Yeah, they should definitely do the late medieval Renaissance. Um, hmm. Butlers aren't really like today. I wouldn't put them in the category of Anglo-Irish or English or anything. But the word Anglo-Irish is funny because you'll have people who were branded as Anglo-Irish, or the whole area branded as Anglo-Irish. And it's mostly because they're in between the two worlds. It's not that they're English per se or Irish. It's because they're in between. And the reason why we have this blur spot, and it's the same thing throughout the entire medieval period world, is the fact that you have blur spots all over the place because there's no nationalism, there's no like borders. Um, like back in the day, you would have gone so far. So if you were going on pilgrimage or whatever, you would have walked so far until you have bumped into somebody who spoke a different language, and then you would have walked, continue walking until you bumped into someone else who spoke something completely different. There was never a point where there was a flag that says, "Okay, now you're entering France, and now you're entering Germany, and now you're entering into Poland." There's none of that. You would have just gotten so far and bumped into a village. And if you were an army, you would have obviously paid attention to the castles off into the distance that would have been looking at you, going, what's this army? What's this person doing here? And you would have also, if you had gone into Pacific settlements where the main trade, so if you're going through a road, at some point you may have come across a major settlement, and you may have to pay the toll tax unless you go around the settlement, going through all the dirt and stuff, which people did. People who don't have carts, they would have known of shortcuts through forests and stuff, so they would have never gone into a settlement to pay a toll tax. But if you're going through shortcuts and stuff through forests, you have the opportunity of being attacked by bandits. That's the only downside of taking shortcuts. Or, as we were finding out the other day, falling into a bog and disappearing. We have a find of a poet who was taking a shortcut. He wasn't going through one of the settlements to pay a poll tax, and he takes a shortcut, and he falls into the bog, and obviously dies. And he reappears. What was it? The 1820s or something? Somebody finds his bog body, and it's a late medieval bog body. And there he is. His clothes are perfectly discovered, perfectly intact. And a lot of people believe he was a poet that was taking a shortcut and just fell into the bog and never got out. Um, Walked around Ireland with a washing machine on his back. Jeez, for charity, yeah, that must have been quite tough. I know people who are ex-military do that all the time. Was he ex-military by any chance? uh, the Fitzpatrick. The Fitzpatrick are a very funny family because they're originally Gaelic. What happened is that they were one of the Ormond branches, wasn't it? The of Ushraga. They were an Ushraga branch, and when they got surrounded by Normans very early on, and then later on the English and stuff, they just turned around and they were like, "Oh, we're Normans. We were always Normans," and they changed their Gaelic name to a Norman name, Fitzpatrick. So they kind of like even at the time they were just like, "Oh, we were always Normans," you know. And they married into a load of Norman families and everything just to identify as Norman. Really, really proper wolf and sheep clothing there, or sheep and wolves clothing, should I say? He was just a teacher. Jeez. So he never did like 4 years military service or anything. I can't. That's hard to believe that that anybody would willingly, without especially without training, well done 4 years with stuff on their back, would willingly just suddenly start putting stuff on their back and start marching around. I did 4 years military service. It was good. But wouldn't do again. Yeah, every time I put anything heavy on my back, I'm just like, does anybody have any more questions? There's none of you online. Surely y'all have questions. All right. Is there anything else I need to check on this? I should have done my hair maybe. Maybe I should have had a shower before I started. My hair is mental. I literally just rolled out of bed and was just like, okay, I need to get this camera testing done. Because I had the what was it? I was on the Creative Contessa Rachel's YouTube last week, and it wasn't working. So I wanted to see what the problem was. So I decided I'll test this now to see if this works for Rachel, and now I can text her back and say, "Hey, it worked! It worked." Is everybody off? Yeah, everybody's sick of me talking. Every single time I do the hair, it just gets into a bigger mess. It's just pure sticky sweat as well. Like it's not even like gel or anything. Just pure sticky. Not sure what to ask. You can literally ask me anything, and I will just make up a lie and tell you. And I'll make the lie sound very convincing, because that's all history is. It's just one big lie. We find stuff like in books and that, and then we come up with a lie to go with it. And some people will say, "Oh, well, there's evidence to go with that." There's no evidence. We just make it up. Especially Irish history, it's all made up because they all got burned in the four courts. All actual Irish history got burned in the four courts. So now we just make it up. That's why it's constantly changing as well. Have I been to Carcassonne? I don't think so. Let me see. I'll have a quick look if I've actually been to that castle or not. I don't think I have been to that castle. I like being able to just switch. It's next to Waterford. Have I done? I see. This is the thing. I could have done reenactment here. Let me have a quick look. There is a massive possibility I have. That is that the Butler's Castle? Why am I not typing in castle? I'm really, really positive I did a living history event around that castle. Absolutely sure. Why have you seen me up there? What caused the Bronze Age collapse? Oh, now you're going on my field. That's my wife. That's a question for my wife. I was in literally reading up on what was it, the Celtic culture during the Bronze Age around the was it 1200 BC, and I was like, what? 'Cause to be honest with you, I always kind of knew that there was a trade link going from Ireland, Brittany, down France, and into the northern, what was it, the northern Spanish area, the Iberian area. But I was just reading up on last night, and the amount of evidence is crazy. Like they're calling it the, what was it, the Celtic North Atlantic, sorry, no, the Celtic Atlantic Empire that went from Ireland to England, Wales, down Brittany, down France, into Galatia and all of those, not Galatia, all those northern Iberian Celtic areas. Um, and they said that that area was making so much money, and so much, like it was in the middle of a golden age. And I believe it as well because the amount of Bronze Age finds in the museum is crazy. It's absolutely insane. If you go to any national museum in Ireland, you're just going to be bombarded with the amount of Bronze Age finds that they have. Um, they sort of always knew that there was sort of a golden age going on because if you go hunting, doing any form of archaeology, and you bump into a Bronze Age find, you're just going to find so much of it, and it's insane high standard. Like you are dealing with when people talk about the Celtic culture and all that stuff. That's where you need to start reading. Um, Although, would you call it Celtic culture? I suppose it's our own little thing going on. Um, but it's crazy. But what caused the collapse of that? Um, I'm not sure. There's a lot of. I was talking to O'Brien about it back in 2015. O'Brien over in University College of Cork, and he says there's a lot of major sieges going on. Like if you go around Ireland and you go to the Bronze Age settlements, a lot of them have been besieged. I'm not sure what the full story is, but maybe there was, maybe some grand family dynasty was wiped out from some revolt or something because they had too much high tax. Um, I don't know what caused the collapse to go into the Iron Age the way it is. Um, yeah, because if the Roman Empire had gone against that, it would have been putting up a way bigger fight. But then they never went into Ireland. The Romans tried a few times to get involved with Irish politics, but they could never do a successful invasion of Ireland because of it. Like trying to invade England was so tiresome for the Romans because they were constantly being hit. Like these are major battles, doing hit and run, hit and run, hit and run. The reason why Boudicca failed in her revolt was because she just, instead of like pulling the larger Roman army out and then hitting it, hitting it, hitting it, hitting it, she decided the Roman army is uphill, and she decides to go uphill and directly at the Romans with no form of escape. Kind of a last ditch kind of romantic effort to completely wipe out the Romans, which is complete insanity. Like, so the gaps that we have is definitely literature wise. Obviously, it doesn't help when you have certain councils allegedly disposing of Irish finds and stuff. But when it comes down to literature wise, um, I don't really have to deal with it because I don't actually have to go around reading it myself because I'm not a academic for any of the universities. Um, how they deal with it would be an interesting question, and definitely a question I would ask them. Um, when it comes down to gaps that I find when I'm doing my research, like if I'm doing research for the Hundred Years' War and stuff, I find it's quite easy to fill in the gaps with what's happening with England. Um, so if you're looking at Art McMurrough Cabinet and you're trying to figure out why Thomas Fitzgerald, is it Thomas Fitzgerald? No, it's the Pope Fitzgerald, the third Earl of Desmond, when he randomly attacks the English, it still baffles me. To find those sources and to find out, roughly what happens around that. Um, you'd be dealing with English sources. So the English can fill in a lot of gaps. And when it comes down to the likes of the O'Donnells, the O'Neills, and all that stuff, you'd be looking at the Scottish court, because the likes of the O'Donnells, the O'Neills, and stuff, they spent a lot of time going in and out of the Scottish court, the Stuarts court. So you'd be looking into that kind of stuff. And then every once in a while, you'll find like little hints in the Holy Roman Empire, about like certain clergy that were in there filling in gaps, Irish clergy. Because the Irish just randomly, especially Irish clergy, just randomly appear in the most random spots, especially in the early medieval period. It's wild during the early medieval period. So they'll pop up randomly in the Holy Roman Empire, Germany. They'll randomly pop up in Spain. So those things can fill in a lot of gaps. Yo, yeah, that is you. What you doing, buddy? So how do I fill in gaps? I mostly just look at other people's records. That's why for me, it's always important to look into different histories, to see what other people are doing. So if you're dealing with like Anglo-Irish, for example, although it's a blur between the Gaelic world and the English world, you can mostly find what life would be like in between all that, because you'll find like the O'Briens, for example, there's a finder on there around the 15th century of a perfect kind of English dress that you would find in England, but it's in the O'Brien territory. So that gives a good indication that a lot of the clothing they would have worn would have been very kind of English, Irish, Gaelicish. So it would have been mostly kind of Anglo style clothing, which would have came from, as we covered a few weeks ago, Burgundy, from Burgundy into France, from France into England, and then from Bristol, England, into Ireland. So that would have been a major influence in the southeast of the country. But then on the northwest side, it's mostly influenced by Scotland. Scotland is hugely influenced the northwest of the country. Does biasm? So in the universities right now, I don't think there's that many biasm for the medieval side. I would massively, argue when it comes down to any modern stuff of biasm. It's I was just when it comes down to modern history in Irish universities, I've heard lecturers covering modern history that say the most wildest stuff, and I'll just be in the class going, "What?" And I mean wild stuff. But when it comes down to the medieval side, Irish lecturers are just phenomenal. They are so good for medieval history. Um, and they're making more. Irish lecturers right now have great connections with Scotland. So we're pretty much in bed with Scotland right now. It's trying to make those connections with the English historians, and the English historians want to make connections with Irish historians. Diarmuid Scully right now is doing a load of work with a lot of English historians on what was it, Gerald of Wales. And the great thing about English historians is that the days of Whig history being kind of imperial British history, they're kind of, put to the side now, kind of like, England is the greatest country in the world and all that kind of stuff. A lot of English historians are kind of putting that to the side right now, which is great. It's pretty much starting to get very much frowned upon. And a lot of more realistic England is getting more and more highlighted these days. We call it Whig history, or Whig historians, English historians who just have this kind of bias idea that England is like the greatest nation that ever lived. So a lot of you still get that even on YouTube. You still come across Whig historians who are English historians that do believe that England is literally related to the Roman Empire, and the English are the civilizers of the society. It's a complete rewriting of history. But I'm not even a fan of that sort of history. I can't even like be in a room with a Whig historian because they're just. It's just not even like English history that I'm into, because I like actual English history, which is the English barons just poking the head off each other, and then when they're not poking the head off each other, they're trying to poke the head off of the French and the Scots. That's the kind of English history that I like reading about. This whole thing of we were one great nation that ruled the world, like, stop. So that's the kind of biasm that you'll still kind of see in YouTube and stuff. And then you'll get the random uneducated lunatic on YouTube as well, which just annoys me, which is that the Irish were subhumans. Anytime I come across a historian like that, they're always uneducated. They just do not open an academic book. They may have found like a random bias history book that was, created by somebody who was not educated in the field, that will just like completely umbrella Irish medieval history as just these mud living bog trotters who just lived inside of a mud hut, and they came out and go, "Oh, hello," and then the English come in and they civilize them. You do come across a good bit of that on YouTube, and every single time I come across that, it just irritates me like there is no tomorrow. It makes absolutely no sense. And it just goes to highlight that they didn't even bother opening up a single academic book. And it's even more annoying when you've got like top high level historians on YouTube who are actually qualified, and they should know better. That clearly do not open up a single article, article, or an academic book. Like that's the biasm I normally see. I don't really see biasm within the universities itself when it comes down to Irish medieval history, and it's becoming less and less with the English historians as well. But on YouTube, yeah, I do come across a good bit of it, from English Whig historians to the people who are just not educated in Irish history. I will keep up the good workers for sure. Yeah, you do get a massive amount of crossover between the Vikings. So at this point in the sources, it refers to them in as Ustmen, Irish Vikings. And then in Iceland, they just outright call the Ustmen Irish. If you're reading the Icelandic sagas, it just calls them Irishmen. And the justification is that they're born in Ireland. So according to Iceland, if you're born in Ireland, you're referred to as Irishmen, which I thought was very, very funny. And it even gives an actual description of what it is to be Irish in the Icelandic saga. So that kind of blew my mind. So the Ustmen in Ireland, the Irish Vikings, they fight against the Normans. The Normans push in, and straight away the Normans want to take over the settlements. So they get into a fight with the Ustmen right away. And the Ustmen warlords, the Ustmen generals, anyone to do with the actual nobility, a lot of them in Ireland are completely pushed out, or they marry into the Normans when they invade. And the Ustmen, they get whacked up pretty bad. I think it was who was it? The head of Dublin, the head of the men of Dublin. I can't remember his bloody name. He's marched up to the side of a mountain, and he's put into a wooden barrel, and they just kick the wooden barrel off into the lake, where his body is torn apart. He's falling down the side of a cliff and into the water and stuff. And the reason why they do that is to kind of show off to the rest of the Usman to stop, rebelling and stuff, which they don't, because the Usman are used to violence. Like when they're not fighting in Ireland, they're going off to Norway to fight, and they're also going off to Denmark to fight as mercenaries. So violence just doesn't put them off, and they continue fighting against the Normans. Eventually, a lot of them have to immigrate. They either stay in Ireland and they move to different parts of the city, and they build their kind of little ghettos and stuff. For example, in Cork, where I'm from, they moved to the southern part, I think. Anyway, they move into a different part of Cork and they settle there. Wayne, who's not on right now, his family moves up to where I live, up around the Mallow area. So a lot of them just immigrate up there. They marry into a Gaelic clan and they settle in that Gaelic area, or they move to a different part of the the city and stuff. Like in Dublin, where they move into Oxtown and stuff. Then you've got the people, so the Vikings, who were then the Ustmen, who were involved with finance and economics and trade, they stay. So you always find when an invasion happens and you have this new warlord or whoever who takes over a settlement, they never push out the people who are involved with economics, finance, and trade. There is one extreme example from Vlad the Impaler in the Balkans, where when he takes over, he has a merchant impaled. He sets him on fire first and then he impales him. But that shocks the medieval world because normally you never touch anybody who's involved with banking, economics, finance, and trade. You just don't touch them because if you touch them, society is going to break down because they know how to run society. That's definitely something to take note of. So when you always find, so the Ustmen, they stay completely the same, and those the same families are in Cork today, so they're never pushed out. And it's the same in Galway as well, where you've got kind of like these Norman Gaelic families that are in Galway, and they stay in power throughout. They're never, even when the new English come in and stuff, they never get like pushed out of it. They marry into more locals and stuff, but they never get pushed out. So when an invading force comes in, they never push out the traders, the economics, the finance, anybody to do with that kind of stuff. You keep them, kept in place. So a lot of those Usman families that were involved with economics, finance, so on and so forth, they would have married into not just the Normans, but they would have married into English families from Bristol, from London, to keep that kind of economic, finance, and all that stuff going. Because people to do with banking, economic, and finance, they kind of stay in with that clique. Well, they should do anyway. Am I worried about historical information? I'm not. I'm not really worried because there's always that kind of there's always academics trying to hold the line, because misinformation in Ireland can be very dangerous, especially when we're dealing with constant fighting up in the north of Ireland. Misinformation can lead to a lot of weird ethnic fighting. So academics are always there trying to hold the line and stuff and make sure the information is put out there correctly. But am I worried about the misinformation from TikTok and stuff? I'm not losing sleep about it, but I am really annoyed about the stuff they post up. Like sometimes it is something that does actually solidly trigger me. Like, especially when you've got something that just outright puts the Irish as subhuman. Anything that puts the Irish as subhuman always completely enrages me. So from time to time, you will see me putting up a short where I am enraged and I am just completely tearing someone apart, especially if it is a high YouTuber. If you're dealing with a high YouTuber, I will literally just copy their comment or whatever, and I will tear it to thunder. Like anything to do with making the Irish out to be subhuman and it being a high YouTuber, it completely enrages me. Like, did Romans try to invade Ireland? Yeah, they mostly wanted to take over Cork. If they had occupied and taken Cork, the Romans, and turned it into a Roman settlement, they could have used that to move their boats around more easier. They probably wanted to take over the Atlantic trade, like completely take it over. And so there was a few ideas put around by the Romans to take over the Cork area. The source of that lately has just disappeared. I've tried to find the source on that because I remember that source was around the place back 10 years ago. But the invasion of Cork, the source on it, I have to go and re-find. So take that as a salt until I find the actual source on that again. The actual invasion, there was actually a first king. He's one of the first major Gaelic kings, because before that we had the Malaysian kings who came in from Iberia. So for a long time, Ireland, throughout the entirety of the Bronze and Iron Age, the monarchy that dominated Ireland was allegedly an Iberian monarchy that ran Ireland. And then around 180, you had a Gaelic king, like a Gaelic king, that wanted to take over the Ireland. So he went over to Rome. He got a bunch of Roman mercenaries, legions, brought them over to Ireland, and these legions and stuff were supposed to like go back to Rome, but they kind of like just stayed in Ireland allegedly. Um, So that's around 9 AD. I'm sure it's around 9 AD that happens. Around, no, it couldn't be 9 AD. 90 AD. I'm sure it's 90 AD that happens. Let me actually quickly find that for you. This is the Vikings of Ireland. It shows you how ill prepared I am for this, like just making stuff up on the cuff. I'm sure it's around. Bang on. It was 80 AD. So at 80 AD, you have an Irish. So you have an Irish fella that's looking to become king of Ireland. So he goes over to the Romans. The Romans are in the middle of their invasion of Scotland, but they hand him over a few Roman soldiers and stuff. He goes back to Ireland and he successfully takes the crown. And he's the first one. If you go into the list of High Kings of Ireland on Wikipedia, you can see he's one of the first ones, because I think the dynasty before that one is the Iberian dynasty, the one that came over from Spain. They're a part of that whole connection to do with, because now we have loads of archaeology finds to support the Iberian dynasty, the Malaysians. So they're dominant all the way up to 80 AD, and then they get usurped by a Gaelic king. Because let's be honest, I think they were in charge for a good 1,000 years, 1,500 years, the Iberian. So they were pretty much Irish by the time they got usurped by the Gaelic king. So then you have your man from Connacht, who eventually becomes, he's related to the likes of Conan and the 100 Battles and all of them. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, when they launched it. Yeah, yeah, that's exactly the one I was talking about, the one where they threw him off the cliff. The McSweeneys as mercenaries. The McSweeneys are the most famous Irish Gallowglass family. They immigrated in between, because at that time they had the islands between Scotland and, what was it? They had the islands between Scotland and Ireland. And the McSweeneys were on the side of the Kingdom of Norway during the Scottish Norwegian War. And because the McSweeneys supported the King of Norway, and when the King of Norway lost that war, the McSweeneys immigrated. They married into the Irish families and they immigrated to Ireland. They were kind of the first ones to do it. And it just becomes a running theme after that. Anytime somebody finds ill favor with the Scottish court, they just run away to Ireland. It's the same thing with the London court. The court in London does the same thing as well, where anytime they have ill favor with the English king, they just run away to Ireland. So the McSweeneys are kind of the first ones to come in, but they have like companies, because they just came straight out of the Scottish and Norwegian War. They have companies of Gallowglass, Gaelic companies, war companies, like. So they bring them, all those companies, they bring over to Ireland, which is just in time, because Brian O'Neill is having the Brian O'Neill revolt around, when is that again? I think it's around 1260, isn't it? Brian O'Neill. Actually, I have it here. I already have the list here. Bum, bum, bum. Brian O'Neill, the last king of Ireland. 1260. I was right. From 1258 to 1260. Brian O'Neill is having Brian O'Neill's revolt against the Fitzgeralds and all of those boys who were pushing into his territory in the north, which they shouldn't have been doing, but they were doing anyway. With the English banner as well. So this was approved by Henry III. And Henry III is a confusing character, because he's also writing letters to O'Neill saying, can you give me mercenaries to send to fight the Scots? Which confuses the O'Neills, because they're being attacked by the English banner, while the English banner is also sending letters to them asking for mercenaries. So it's very confusing for the O'Neills. But yeah. So the McSweeneys are mercenaries to the what was it, the O'Neills at first, but then Brian O'Neill gets killed early on during his revolt. So now you have Ireland full of these war companies that just want to continue fighting and making money. So they decide at the same time the Tamaud Wars kick off in the west of Ireland around the O'Brien area. So they go down and they join in with that war down there, and then they just go from war to war to war. And I think they set up their company because they get a castle. They make a lot of money from all these wars, so they go build a castle to keep their company in, and they then just kind of hire themselves out to anybody. Do, do, do. I can just talk away. I need to do the old Discord and Patreon, all that stuff, so I can just keep yapping away. You could literally just dump me in a room, and I will just yap and yap and yap about what I know. Most of the time, I just make it up. I literally just make up stuff, lads. Literally, even right now, I just made all that up. There's no like the McSweeney's don't even exist. There's just it was just a bunch of Scottish lads in Ireland one day, and they were having a few pints in the pub, and they were like, "So boys, they're remaking up Irish history. Let's just make up the fact we were mercenaries. That's literally what McSweeney's did. They were in a pub one day, and they just made up the whole thing." And that would have been around what was it, 1960, just before the Troubles kicked off. It was when the McSweeney's were in McSweeney's pub. They just made up the whole thing, and it was mostly just to advertise McSweeney's pub. I can't even remember where that pub is. I'm sure if you type it into Google, you could actually find that pub. I don't really specialize in what was it, genealogy and stuff. If you're hitting bricks and stuff, if you've got a family who is mostly specializing, I will look up your family though. I'll probably have a short for it later today or something once I've done a bit of reading in it. God, even I'm hitting a brick into your family right now. Sometimes I like cheat and I type in like coat of arms and stuff. I just keep poking around until I find something. You see, there you go. For the medieval side, what I did was that I got your surname. So when I typed in the history of it and stuff, nothing was popping up. But this is weird. I figured this out when I was studying coat of arms. If you type in your surname and then type in coat of arms, a load of medieval history just pops up. So I did that, and now I've got a good bit of history. So I've got work to do later on if I want to turn this into a short. This is what I do sometimes when somebody asks me, "Can you do a short or something on my family?" When I first type in the family, I hit a wall, and I'm like, "Okay, who the hell are these people?" So I type in coat of arms, and then the whole thing pops up for me. So I can then make a short or whatever it is. Oh, your family's proper Gaelic, aren't they? Anyway, can read about that all day. No, I'll never shut up. I'll just talk and talk and talk all day about Irish history. Most people just have to run away from me, and I'll just continue. You could literally just get a straw. If you get a really good looking scarecrow man and you put him next to me, I will just talk to the scarecrow all day. Just make sure the scarecrow is all right with drinking coffee. I just keep filling up his drink and go and make myself some more coffee as well. I need to get that sorted as well. Is the what was it? The coffee tribute. I need to get that off you at some stage as well. I'm going to set all this up after Christmas. So on the 31st, I'll put up the Patreons and all that kind of stuff. So I'll just whack that on, and that way you guys can give me money on Patreon. I won't bother doing the YouTube membership and all that stuff because I cover medieval history, so all that will get demonetized, and I'll have that money taken away from me for even mentioning medieval history. How dare you talk about something that hurts my feelings? Oh, what was it? George R. R. Martin, isn't it? Um, yeah, he did. You can see that straight away. The way the Starks are Yorkists, and the what was it? The Lancastrians or the Lannisters or the Lancers or the Lancastrians. They're a bit of a tongue twister, but yeah, you can see it straight away. There's a lot of influences on Game of Thrones that are historical. I like Game of Thrones is really really good, but I could say something that ruins all of Game of Thrones for you, and it'll ruin it because my wife used to absolutely love Game of Thrones, and I read it because she was telling me to go read it, so I read it, and I told her what I thought about it, and it just poisoned the whole experience for her. So I could tell you what ruins Game of Thrones for me, but it'll ruin your experience as well. So um, I did 2 years in UCC. Yeah, UCC is absolutely amazing. I do love UCC. And the great thing about Cork around the whole UCC area is you don't see half of the garbage. Um, because if you go around the train station and stuff, God, the amount of garbage around there. I just wouldn't advise if you're going to see Cork, from Elizabeth's Fort all the way to UCC. There's a few dodgy people in between. Like if anybody comes up to you asking for a cigarette, just keep walking, because they're just weird alcoholics around that area. Yeah, you come across a few strange alcoholics in between Elizabeth's Fort to UCC. Is there any other place that you need to go in Cork? Obviously, you need to go to North Main Street and South Main Street, but once again, you come across the weirdest alcoholics around that area, like the weirdest ones. Like even tour guides will be like, yeah, they're kind of happy hippies, but I'm kind of like, they're just weird. So there's a few spots in Cork where if somebody walks up to you, ask him for a cigarette, just keep walking. Just keep walking because they're the weirdest people. Is there any topics I haven't covered? There is a good few topics I really, really want to cover. I want to cover more stuff on early medieval Ireland, especially during the Golden Age of Ireland, especially to do with the High Kings. I feel so ignorant when it comes down to the Golden Age of Ireland, especially king wise. Um, I just want to sit down and actually study the politics that's going on. I know we have very little snippets, and then we've got a little bit more information later on. And then archaeology is not so great right now. Well, it's quite exciting up and around Clonmacnoise because anytime they do any archaeology work up and around Clonmacnoise, they're finding more and more and more stuff up around that area. 1 minute, I've got a complaint. My laptop. This is feed me. I need more. Oh yeah, that's the problem. Let me plug this in. As you can see, I'm very organized. Right. Looking, I'm wearing pants today. So is there anything in particular I want to cover? I want to cover more stuff on early medieval Ireland. I'm somewhat educated on all the stuff that happens during the very start of the invasions into Britain. In particular, the way that you have the Ullid and the Dalriada moving into Scotland, into Pictland, and you also at the same time you have the Irish moving into Wales. So I'm somewhat pretty much in was educated with that kind of stuff, but it's more moving on to the likes of what was it, the 600 AD, 700 AD, that especially that whole spot there. I need to seriously get more educated with everything that's going on there. Always asking the question of why are the Irish content not pushing more into Britain? Is it that you just kind of settle down with the Saxons and stuff? Because when the Norman invasion happens, the Irish become very defensive, and they actually send invasion forces over to fight the Normans. So it's a question of like what's going on there and stuff. What is the relationship between the Saxons and the Irish? Is that why they're not pushing in? But then when you have the Irish Vikings, so what happens is you have the Vikings who come in and they take over the Norwegians and the Danish first move in and they take over. But straight away, Ivor the Bonus settles in Ireland and he builds a relationship with the Northern Inal. And then there's absolutely no problems of him going in and taking the north of York. And then later on, it becomes, after a bit of fighting between Halfdan, Ragnarsson. So there's fighting between the Irish Vikings and Halfdan Ragnarsson, who's the Danish Vikings. So there's a little bit of fighting about that happens in Ireland. The Irish Vikings win, and then they end up pushing over and they take back York and reoccupy that. So why is it okay for the Irish Vikings to take over the north of England, fight with the Saxons, but then the Irish seem to have this kind of relationship there? Like, what is the actual relationship between the Gaelic Irish, the native Irish, and the Saxons? I'd love to do more investigating into that, and you can find a lot of the indications for that relationship around 600 AD and 700 AD when Ireland is at its peak golden age. But Ireland at that point then is building a trade, sort of educated golden age, where they're sending priests and monks left, right, and centre all over Europe, and they're building connections all the way over to Rome. What was it? Saint Columbanus, isn't it? I always get mixed up between him and the one that got sent over to Iona. But he gets sent over to the Alps, and he builds relationship with the Rome, because at the time Rome is just like, well, you're all heretics up there. So the Irish need to send people over to Rome to tell them, hey, we're not heretics. Like we don't have full understanding of what's happening in Rome, because you're in the middle of a dark age, but we're not heretics. We're Christians here. So I'd love to study more into that stuff, especially this Montan stuff, while I've got a little bit of a breather. Where am I with these questions? Will the clothing pay? I don't know. Will it get its own channel? I'm not sure. What's the most interesting period in Irish? So if you're an Irish nationalist, I would definitely look at Claire Downham's new work on the Irish Vikings, especially with their invasions into the north of Britain. So if you're into the old Irish nationalism and you're a proud little Irishman and you like hearing stories about the Irish chopping up English people, the Viking Age, once the Eamers take over Dublin, definitely read from that point onwards, and how it turns into an economic golden age. I find that really, really fascinating. The early medieval period, for most people, if you're into Ireland and its golden age and everything to do with early medieval Ireland is absolutely amazing, especially if you're reading academic work. If you're reading work from morons, it's crap. It's terrible, because all we did was live in mud huts, and then we had a priest that just walked around with a stick and told us about Christianity. That's all that happens, according to morons. But if you're reading from academics, it's one treasure after the next treasure after the next treasure. Anything to do with academics is always absolutely amazing. From the collapse of the Roman Empire up to the economic golden age that Claire Downham is discovering with Dublin. That's all absolutely fascinating stuff. As long as you don't come at the early medieval period from a very black and white view of, the poor Irish view, more of kind of like open-mindedness to what academics are discovering with their finds. It's early medieval period, the golden age of Ireland, all the way up to the coming of the Normans is absolutely fascinating. So I definitely would put that as the most interesting period, especially with study these days. My favorite era, me personally being a little bit biased, I do like the period of the Wars of the Roses in Ireland. I just like full plate armor, and I like the way that politics is going into the Tudor period, how it's in the court and all that stuff, and I like all that kind of stuff. So me being biased, I do like when the Fitzgeralds take over the Irish Parliament, and that I do find that absolutely fascinating. But that's just me being biased. Overall, if you were a common neutral Irish person, I would definitely say if you want to find Irish history that's most interesting, without a shadow of a doubt, it is the early medieval period, Ireland, from its golden age to the Viking age. Um, nice. Yeah, Franciscans is another thing. I want to get in contact with a Franciscan monk or somebody who specializes in that. There's a few good YouTube channels that do Franciscan history. I want to get one of them on to talk about Franciscan history, because the Franciscans, there's a lot of Franciscan abbeys that get built in Ireland in the late medieval period, and I'm really ignorant about all of it. So I need to get somebody who specializes on that onto the channel to have a talk about Franciscans. I ordered. Do I have that book? Give me a quick look. I'm pretty sure I've got that book on me right now, the early medieval one. Oh, do I have that one? No, I don't. I have this one. This one's amazingly good. Yeah, I would advise definitely when it comes down to Roman finds in Ireland, this is a Bible right now. I need to memorize and learn this way more. So I definitely would recommend this one. I know you can't flip it over or anything. Actually, I'll just write out the name here. Ireland in the medieval world. Was it AD 400 to 2000? Of course, I got that one wrong. 1 second. This is all wrong, by the way. I just typed it all in wrong. Landscape. So you guys can just copy it straight over. I feel like one of those annoying teachers. There's the order. That's sort of the Bible right now for a lot of people. So I definitely would give that one as well if you're into early medieval Ireland. Yeah, Blind Boy, I need to watch that. I'm in Japan, so I keep getting blocked. So I'm trying to get people to pirate it over to me. Of course, he's trying to make money off RT and stuff. But hey, like, people like me need to see this stuff so we can talk about it. Like, you know. So if you make it private in Ireland only, like, I cannot watch these programs, and Irish overseas cannot watch these programs either. Everybody. So the United Ireland question, everybody is asking me about that one. I have a lot of friends who are loyalists, like a lot of friends who are loyalists. So I don't really make a comment on that kind of stuff. I tease them when they ask me about my opinion. 100% play it up and annoy them. So do I believe in a united Ireland? To be completely honest with you, I want a solution where a lot of people don't disappear. So do I believe in a united Ireland? I like the romantic idea of a united Ireland, but it will cost a lot of money to do. If it's done wrong, a lot of people could disappear, which is definitely not what I want, especially when I have a lot of friends who are loyalists. It's a complicated one. So I'll be honest with you, I do like the romantic idea, and I do think it's in our lifetime. But I wouldn't want a lot of my friends to disappear, and the economic can be a massive burden. I don't live in Ireland right now, so it would be unfair to me to turn around and say, "Oh, I want a united Ireland," and I don't pay the price for it. That would be unfair. So yeah, hopefully, if there's means to get united Ireland, I would support that. As long as it isn't in the cost of good friends of mine, and also the economic needs to be proper balance. Ireland right now with the GDP and stuff, if the government got a grip, it should be able to afford it. Like it keeps saying, oh, it costs too much money and stuff. The amount of GDP that's going from America into Britain between these companies and stuff could easily pay without, absolutely no problems. In fact, it should make money from it. But the Irish government, I don't know what it's going doing these days. And there's so much closed door politics going on in Ireland right now, like a lot of closed door politics, especially between Britain and America, that it's very difficult to say what's actually going on. Where are we? Are you in Japan? Yeah, of course I'm in Japan. I'm in Japan right now. So for anybody who doesn't know, I used to be a tour guide in around the Cork, Limerick area. And my wife used to do archaeology, and she was in the middle of doing an archaeology dig up in Dublin before coronavirus kicked off. And the two of us were left in a dire situation. So my wife went online and she found work doing accountancy in Japan. So the two of us just picked up and just left because we really didn't have much of a choice, to be honest with you. So we left, went over to Japan, where housing is massively cheap, but trying to make money is funny at the same time. So there's always like positives and negatives when you get put into a different situation. So right now I'm just kind of in Japan enjoying myself. People keep asking me when am I returning to Europe. There is plans to go back to Europe at some stage. Where exactly in Europe, I don't know, especially with Ireland being in a housing crisis. And I don't see Ireland fixing its housing crisis because Ireland now has become a country that's on demand. So just like Singapore, which is also in a housing crisis, there's always people wanting to move to Ireland to work. And there's always going to be work in Ireland, especially to do with finance, economics, business, especially with all the companies going in and out of Ireland. I know Trump says he wants to balance more of this between America and Ireland, and completely destroy its relationship with Europe. But that's complicated, and what he does and what actually happens are two different things. So I'm not sure about that. Are you kind of talking about the tricolor? So if you're talking about a regular white flag, you are talking about that is a sign for peace. I've never come across. I know it pops up in early medieval warfare, where people are shooting at each other, and you've got the person who's hiding will put up a white flag as surrender. I don't think the white flag appears anywhere in the medieval period, not until we start going into that transition between the early medieval period. And I think it's because people are hiding between rocks and people are shooting at each other. I think that's when the white flag starts to appear. I could be wrong. I haven't done any research on that, but I just noticed that that's when the white flag starts to appear. Now, if you're talking about the Irish tricolor, which is green, white, and orange, you've got Irish is Catholic and also represents the Gaelic. So green is for Gaelic. White is peace between the two societies. And then orange is for the Scottish, Dutch, and the Scottish, the Dutch, and the English. And also represents the Protestants. So it's peace between all these communities. So it's the bringing together, really. So from a much more earlier form, which would be Catholic, peace, and Protestant, it's the bringing together of the religious communities. And then from more of a modern perspective of Gaelic, peace, and the various people that kind of influenced Ireland, such as the Dutch, the English, and the Scottish, it's more or less bringing together all these foreign communities and stuff. So that's what the tricolor is supposed to represent. However, because it's become a flag that into trouble is only because in the rest of the world, because Ireland does a lot of peacekeeping, it's seen as a very peaceful flag, as a relief to a lot of countries, especially if you're in the likes of Lebanon, Lebanon, Syria, and the Congo, all those areas. It's a massive relief when people see the tricolor. But in the north of Ireland, it's seen as a very aggressive flag because of all the fighting that's going on. So there is people in the north that want a more of a united flag that represents a modern united Ireland, if there is a unified Ireland, because the tricolor has become such a bloody flag up there. that was a culture shock. Is Japan a culture shock? I kind of came to Japan with a very open mind, and I had been to America and Africa before. Africa was a culture shock when I went over there when I was like 23 or something. Japan was sort of a culture shock. I'm not going to turn around and say I wasn't, my body didn't go into shock or anything, because there was, especially when my money, because when I first came over here, the euro was worth so much money. It was crazy. So I lived like a god when I first came here. But once my money started to like settle, that's when the shock itself came in. And you can see that with the YouTubers. The YouTubers over here, the very wealthy ones, they live off in space. Like anytime they say, well, in Japan, it's like this, don't believe a single thing they say. They're off in, magic land. I remember when PewDiePie, his first episode in Japan, he was given a free car. And he's like, God, people are so friendly here. They just give free cars and everything. I'm like, they don't do that for regular people. Even the forms, like all these paperwork, when you come to Japan, the shock would be the paperwork. I was warned about the paperwork, so I wasn't too bad. But a lot of people, when you're spending almost the entire day in an office doing paperwork to identify if you're a human or a creature of some sort, everything. They will literally go over everything. That's a shock to the system for a lot of people. I was warned and warned and warned about it, so I didn't think it was that bad once I had gone through the whole system, but that's because I thought it was that bad. So was Japan a massive culture shock to me? Not until my money started to balance. Then it became this like, oh, well, where am I? Like, is this Mars or something? Because for a long time, I was pretty much off on holiday land. And I was telling people this as well. So it wasn't until my money started thinning out and I had to go and earn money, then that became a massive kind of shock to the system. I still knew what I was going through and stuff. And trying to do a full day's work in Japan, it's slave labor. I'm just going to be completely honest with you. It's just full on slave labor here. Like, and you've got more and more stuff that's coming out every day in all the news articles and stuff about what's happening in a lot of workplaces in Japan. And like, God, from the stuff that you see to the stuff that you have to do, like, Jesus, like, it's just slave labor, like, the language, I am terrible at Japanese. When I was working for one of the companies, two of the companies, my Japanese was starting to pick up a lot because I like having banter. And the work colleagues I worked with, like they're so nice. They will literally break their back to help you out, but they love good banter. It's sort of like it's kind of like a mixture of kind of English, kind of York banter with kind of like French stick banter. So the Japanese like a good laugh and love a good banter, and I love a good banter and a good laugh. So I got on with everyone I worked with really, really well. The first job I was working with, the first company I was working with, I got on with the bosses, I got on with people I worked with. The second job I was working with, I got on really well with all of the staff, like super well, even better than I did with the first lot. The first lot I really got on with. But the bosses and hierarchy, they were just horrible. I just really didn't like them. Like, um, so I was picking up bits and bobs of Japanese, but yeah, I'm not really the quickest at picking up languages if you haven't noticed. So I pick up like all the important stuff, obviously, like Daijabu and stuff. But like when it came down to having regular conversations, it was funny. Like it was like talking to a 2-year-old child or something. Like I just wasn't picking up that quick. Like, do I get annoyed when people call it the green, white, and gold flag? No, not really. I kind of prefer gold over orange. Like when somebody says gold, it's like, well, I'm not going to explain what the orange is. um, I kind of like ignore all that kind of nationalist stuff. The reason why I avoid a lot of modern nationalism is, God, those conversations get dodgy, especially because I talk to English people, I talk to loyalists, I talk to Scots people, and anytime they bring up anything that's modern or even getting medieval stuff and making it nationalist, I just like, oh no, there's a cat there. Look, the cat's very nice. I like the cat, Yeah, it's funny. Like, have I encountered black companies? Well, yeah, no, I think I gotten to this point now where I think every company in Japan is a black company. Like, like honestly, like I love Japan, and the people here will break their back, but the hierarchy, oh my god, like um they did not accept the reason for that. So if you applied for teaching during the coronavirus, you would have just gotten it because they were finding it so hard to get workers. And I literally the reason why I even got into Japan with my wife was because first off I was married, and secondly there was like a gap. Because for ages, me and my wife were waiting for the green zone to come in because when the coronavirus came in, straight away Japan was one of the first countries to close its gates. So there was a little gap between we didn't know at the time, but we knew there was going to be a little gap opening for us to zip in and get into the country. I think it was around just between the summer and Christmas. Japan suddenly allowed foreigners, not foreigners, Japanese abroad to come back into the country. So there were loads of Japanese people. Um, some of them were homeless, just wandering around China and stuff. They didn't know what to do because Japan wasn't letting them back in. So Japan got pressured and pressured and pressured to let their citizens back into the country. So it was only emergency citizens that were allowed back in. And then suddenly they allowed all their Japanese citizens back into the country. And that's when we zipped in. So we zipped in, and it was a company, it was an American pen company that organized everything with Yuki because Yuki was going to work. First off, when she first came to Japan, she was meant to teach people how to sell pens. And then she got a job with a German company selling, doing their accountancy and stuff. And it was that kind of little opening that was all organized by a American company that myself and Yuki got into the country. And all of it paid for. Thank God, because we didn't really have the money to be wasting going to America. What was it? Ireland to Japan. So lucky that was all paid for. So thank God for all that. Like, um, so when it comes down to the problem now with teaching in Japan, I when I first came into the country, I was teaching, doing ALT work, and there was loads of it. But now they're cutting back on people coming into the country to teach, but now they're bringing in more JET programs, in particular Americans. They want more Americans to come in and teach American English because the Japanese prefer American English, unlike Hong Kong. In Hong Kong, they prefer British English. But the Japanese absolutely adore American English. So they want more Americans through the JET program. And the JET program is cheaper than hiring me. So if they were to hire me to teach English, or anybody who came into the country and lives in the country, it's more expensive to hire them because over time you'd have to give more and more wages, and Japan loves loyalty and all that stuff. So overall, it costs more money to hire somebody who lives in Japan than setting up the JET program. The JET program is cheaper, so they can keep bringing in people into the system, particular Americans. They want more Americans in. So the JET program and all that stuff, it's getting more difficult to apply for and join for teaching and that. So I'm not shocked that they wouldn't let you in after 35. Disgusting behavior, but I'm not shocked. Am I the slave trade in Dublin? Let me have a quick Google on that one. Because I could be. I left a load of my books back in Ireland. Straight away pops up with Trinity. Who's this one? Okay. Anyway, I'll just click on his page there. He's just a researcher for Trinity. He's done a lot of late medieval stuff as well. Oh, because he worked for Denmark for a while. That's why he does so much work with Trinity College in Dublin and with Denmark. No, I haven't come across any of his work. Right now, he seems to be doing a lot of late medieval. Ah, I knew that. 2008, he discovered the night Ridera and the connection with night. I was thinking the same thing as well because the word Ridera, which is night in Irish, the same word pops up in the Swedish language as well. And I was like, I don't think Irish knights are. This is the 11th century, by the way, just after the Battle of Clontarf. So after the Battle of Clontarf, the word knight appears. It's in the what was it? The oh my god, what's the book called again? It's a really famous one from Cork. There's a famous story from Cork, and in it talks about knights. But the knight is a Swedish word. So it's my understanding that it's not. We're not dealing with um, English or French knights. We're dealing with Irish knights. So they would have had a kite shield, but they would have also had mail, helmet, and the old Dane axe, the big, massive two-handed axe. But they would not have been like the Norman knights who were on the horse and the kite shield and stuff. So we're dealing with more of a Hiberno-Scandinavian sort of knight rather than a Norman sort of knight. Norman knights come in obviously with the Norman invasion of Ireland, and then you see Norman knights in Ireland. But Irish knights are more like mail, nasal helmet, kite shield on the back, and then the old Dane axe. And I was thinking that. So now that I see there, he's actually got a award and everything for that. I was thinking the same thing. It's always handy when you've got these connections so you can prove the point. Um, yeah, he's done a lot of work on early medieval Scandinavian and Ireland. He mostly does translation by the looks of it. Um, I haven't slept in any of the pods yet or anything like um, ramen noodles. I love ramen. I prefer if you're gonna do it, go to the ramen restaurants and stuff. They are just absolutely amazing. I absolutely love them. So no, I haven't gone into any of the pod hotels, and I also haven't. Sorry, no, go to the ramens. I might make this a normal thing. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. What's my favorite Nicolas Cage movie? God, that's well off topic. Yeah, there's endless amount of stuff right now because they're short. What's crazy is there isn't even that much medieval literature because a lot of it got burned during the forecourts, and yet we don't have enough translators to go through all the stuff in Ireland. They're still looking for more people. There's like a lot of the students that I was doing my 4 years with in the University College of Cork. A lot of them went off and became translators. Even like if you listen to medieval Irish podcast that Minute is doing pretty much every week they're calling up for more translators. They're just always, and you see, I'm not even great at translating and stuff, especially translating. I wouldn't be the best um, with languages and that. I can barely, like, I've been learning Irish since I was a little child, and my Irish isn't even the greatest. Like, the reason why I clicked Irish sometimes so well is just, I don't know, just, kind of that natural language. Sometimes Munster Irish in particular. Sometimes people correct me. They were like, "You're Irish, that's pronounced wrong and stuff," and I'd be like, "That's because I'm doing Munster Irish. I'm not doing Dublin or Ulster Irish. It's what was it, Munster Irish." I think my favorite Nicolas Cage movie is definitely Face Off. I think that's my favorite one. I got a lot of happy memories with that one. Oh, the chariots. Yeah. So the chariots were used for both. Sometimes they could be used. So they have three functions. First off, they could be used to javel. So they could go up against the shoot. So you know how a medieval battle works in real life. You've got two walls of people. So they'll come up with their spears and they'll make a spear wall and they'll come up against it. So this is one spear wall of people, and this is another spear wall of people, and they'll come at each other and they'll start hitting each other with their spears, right? And then once they'll do that for about 3 minutes, and then they'll rotate around or they'll march back and rotate and stuff, right? Depending on the situation. So in between them moving back, there could be a charioteer who go in between, and that charioteer will just throw javelins in. to try to kill people as they're rotating and moving around and stuff. And they will also, if they're not throwing javelins, they'll just make fun of the other side and stuff. So they'll have a bit of banter with the other side. Sometimes the warriors will come and they'll jump off of the chariot and they'll challenge while all this rotation and stuff is going on. They'll challenge warriors in the line. So they'll start making fun of people that they recognize in the line, because these are clans that fight back way back 100 years. So they'll notice somebody in the line and they'll start making fun of them, calling them out and stuff. And so somebody might call out. So while the rotation and stuff is happening and there's a bit of a pause, they'll have a bit of a fight in between. And obviously, if somebody gets killed on the opposite side, that will kill the morale. So every once in a while, you will have champions who will jump off of a chariot, challenge somebody, they'll have a bit of a fight. And then afterwards, they'll get cheered back into their line and stuff and get back into the line formation. And then the lions will start fighting again. Sometimes you'll get some people who are completely mental and they'll get their chariot. And because you're dealing with line on line fighting, the purpose of it is to break the line so people can rush in and then start circling the people that are in the line, surround them and murder them, right? So your purpose is to break the line. So sometimes you'll have people who will get the chariot and just charge it into the line, and then people behind it will start breaking out. You hear about a good bit of it happening very early on in the ancient period, but as we go into the early medieval period, it gets less and less. And I think it's because the shield walls get a bit too good for just ramming horses into the line with. But then there's a change then when you have the Norman invasion of Ireland, when the Normans are using the horses to break into the spear walls. So you've constant changing and stuff. And then finally, the main purpose of the chariot in Ireland is to help with the rotation. So they go in, they're having their fight stuff, they go out. When they're rotating, some of their weapons are going to be broken. You'll also have people who are injured and hurt. So they'll put the broken kit and the people who are injured, hurt, or killed into the back of the chariot, and the chariot will go to the settlement, trade in for new weapons and stuff, put the person in the hospital or whatever is around to fix them up, and they'll come back into the battlefield, bring the fresh kit in. Sometimes there'll be fresh people who were either arriving late or in the settlement going, oh, geez, maybe you guys were starting to lose, maybe I'll jump on. They'll jump on the chariot, bring fresh body, fresh people in and stuff. There's rotation going on. So that's, especially when you're going into the Viking Age, that's mostly what the chariots are used for, is to help with the rotation that's going on in the background before they go back into poking each other with spears again. There's a good few reenactments that are going on, so you can get a fair idea of the fighting that's going on. So the reenactment groups that are in Ireland, so you can see what a spear wall looks like, is the likes of Whitehorse, Fingal up in Dublin. So Whitehorse is in Cork, Fingal is in Dublin, Daisha are in Waterford. There is loads more groups in Ireland, and they do reenactments of these big, massive battles. Right now, I don't think they have any chariots. They need more funding and need more money, like everything else to do with medieval history. So have I ever read? I do in my own time. So do I read Irish history from like 60, 70 years ago? Yeah, I do from time to time. But I mostly, unless it's regular how people lived. So most of the time, because Ireland was kind of closed off until 1969, there's a lot of parts of Ireland that keeps to the really old traditional stuff. And I will highlight this from time to time. When I was doing my work and my rants on why the Irish don't have any shoes, I was looking at not just early medieval stuff, but also modern stuff all the way up to 1969. And it shows you, it literally blatantly tells you, like the children and the women will tell you why they don't have any shoes on. And that's to not ruin their shoes, because they're dealing with, if you go off of the path or the road and you're going into the muddy sides, it's to stop you slipping and falling, because the shoes before 1920, and even on top of 1920, people were still taking their shoes off. Until 1920, there's no rubber on the shoes. So the moment you go onto a muddy part, you slip and fall off. So people just took their shoes off when they left the road. And the other reason is dirt. A lot of stuff gets very muddy, very dirty. So a lot of people just take their their shoes off before they go on to the muddy and dirty side. So that's the reason why a lot of people walk around barefoot in Ireland, not the fact that they're poor. Like there's photos online of people who are very wealthy walking around with no shoes on, and then you've got an entire comment section going, "Oh, it's terrible how poor they are." And I'm like, are you not looking at their outfit? Their outfit is so expensive. And it's the same thing with the Kerns. People are like, oh my God, the Kerns must be the lowest, poorest people. The Kerns were nobles. They were fully trained martial artists that were trained by other nobles. The Kerns come from the noble class, but people consider them poor because they have no shoes on. They have no shoes on because they're constantly fighting in the dirt, you know? Ireland is a quite muddy, dirty country, like. Um, so I do a lot of research looking at Ireland from 70 years ago. If I'm looking at the common basic stuff, Bronze Age shoes, all the way up to 1969, people were still made Bronze Age shoes because they were so easy to make to protect your feet. Because obviously, after a long day of walking around barefoot, your feet are going to hurt. So what people did was they knew how to make Bronze Age shoes like really, really easy, which is just a piece of leather. And then you get like a string of leather and you just use it as a shoelace and you tie up in the front and you just zip up. It's literally just, you kind of put two leathers together around your foot and then you put holes in between. And then you put the leather in between, you put the strip of leather in between tied up and then you just tighten it. Very easy to make as long as you know the technique to it. So I even look at Bronze Age shoes that you find all the way up to 1969, if not later on, still further. So it is very, very fascinating. Do I have any favorite Gaelic song? I should know my favorite Gaelic song, and it's literally it's the one that's up in the Wicklow Mountains. It is completely out of my head. It's actually my wife's favorite Gaelic song. Actually, I think the best yet to come. If you're talking about Gaelic song that's non-medieval, there's a video game called Metal Gear Solid, and it has the best is yet to come. That's one of my favorite Gaelic songs of all time. My favorite Irish song of all time is what was it? Black is the Color by who's it? I like Black is the Color. That's my favorite Irish song of all time. But yeah, my favorite Irish is definitely what was it? So yeah, right. This is going on for about. I'll do this for another 10 minutes. What time are we on? 10:10. Right. I'll do this for another 10 minutes, and I'll take it that the live stream was a success, since you can see me and you can hear me and I can waffle. So if you have any more questions, I will answer them for the next 10 minutes. What was it? Also, I need to waffle on about. I think that's it. This week's video. I'm gonna see if I can get away with getting a video from the RTE player before they pull it down, and I'm going to post it up. It's from what was it? Nationwide. They have the anniversary for St. Bridget. I was in one of those anniversary shows, and I thought they would keep it up forever, and they didn't. Took it down. So what I'm going to do is, hopefully it works. I'm going to get a video from Nationwide, which is one of the anniversaries to St. Bridget, the 1500th anniversary. And I'm going to try to see if I can get it onto. You sent me a link. I don't know if that works. Let me have a gawk. Why did you send the link? God, I have somebody send me a message again. Not Anglo-Brit colonizer. Oh my God. Why do people have to apply modern nationalism to medieval period? They're two different subjects. I'm literally going to have to tell this person that Anglo-Irish does not mean Anglo-Brit. He literally put in, for Roman British, read Welsh today, not Anglo-Brit colonizers. Like, head is baffled. Yeah, people burn my brain. Yeah, the link on Blind Boy. Where did you send that? Is there like a comment section? I'm going to break my thing by pressing buttons. Welcome to the live stream. Okay. You did not expect a Metal Gear reference? Plenty of Metal Gear, right? Plenty of gaming reference. I like a good game. Right. So live stream works. That's the main thing. So I'll say that to Rachel anyway, so we can plow ahead. Because I think either this weekend or another weekend she wants to try again to do. We'll probably do it the following weekend. Oh wait, we can't because my brother's over. So my brother's coming over to Japan the following weekend. Do I like Irish mythology? I love Irish mythology. The problem with Irish mythology, with the majority of books and pretty much 99% of YouTubers to do Irish mythology, is that they cover it from a Christian, a Roman Christian interpretation. So, what is a Roman and Christian interpretation? A Roman Christian interpretation is when you have dominant gods, right? So, a Roman Christian will look at Irish mythology, and they'll pick Lugh, for example, and they will think Lugh is the dominant father god of the Irish, right? When they're not. Like, the thing is about Celtic paganism. Celtic paganism is very local. So when you go into an area, they have their local gods. And there will be similarities between the local gods in Celtic paganism of France and similarities in Ireland, but they're not the same gods. They're very localized gods. But when you're dealing with YouTube and a lot of books that are non-academic, is they will just run off. They will literally get the sources, the Christian Roman sources, and they will just run hell for leather with it, and have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. That's my problem with a lot of Irish mythology. And if you highlight, because some of these YouTubers are waffling these lies, are top Irish YouTubers. So the moment you, which I will be, don't you worry, don't you worry. The moment I open up the floodgate, I will be opening up the floodgate. It's the same thing with this Anglo-Irish thing right now that's going on in my channel, where anytime I mention the word Anglo-Irish, people's feelings get hurt. It's the same thing with that floodgate. So the moment I highlight the fact that you're just waffling crap, you're literally coming at it from a Roman Christian perspective, their feelings are going to get hurt. The floodgates will be opened, and my comment section will be full of people. I know this. I know this for a fact. But I'm going to, at some stage, I will do some Irish mythology, and I will cover a bit of it. How I go about it, I'm not quite sure yet. Yeah, you can talk away about it. I don't think I'll know about that sort of stuff, to be honest with you, if there is a similarity between Santa Claus. So you can chat away all about that. Like, I won't know what you're talking about, but yeah, you can chat away all you want. Just make sure you finish up in the next 2 minutes or so I can go make myself breakfast, because I literally rolled out of bed. I didn't even get coffee this morning. My wife has a tendency these days of sometimes not making me coffee, so I got no coffee this morning. So I've got water here, like, so I still need to do make myself coffee. I need to make myself some brekkie, which I'll do in about 2 minutes or so. Book of Invasions available online, perhaps. Is it? I think it should be under UCC. UCC have the majority of Irish literature free. Let me have a look. If it's not under the UCC website, UCC. I think this is it, maybe. If it's not, you should try to poke around and see if you can. I think I found it here. I think it might be this one. I'm not sure. It's loading. But if not, you can always just call into UCC and see if you can go into the library and see if you can book to see the book downstairs, like the original one. You'd be surprised how much stuff if you go into the library, go talk to the security guard there, and get into the library, and then talk to the woman behind the desk. Because obviously you won't be able to walk in and out. You have to talk to security first when you arrive at the library, because there's so many crazy people. There's so many crazy people, and then you've got the crazy people who decide they want to burn stuff for no reason. So you'll have to talk to the security first. He'll let you into the library, and then from there, talk to the woman behind the desk, and you can probably arrange to read the actual book itself and see the book itself. You'd be surprised what you will be able to look at and stuff. I don't think this is it. Maybe. Oh, maybe it is. I think this is it. I think this is PDF. Boop. Yeah, the Invasions of Ireland is a really, really, really important book if you're into the Bronze Age Ireland and Iron Age Ireland. Book of Invasions is really important to read for all that sort of stuff. I don't think that's the link. I'm pretty confident that is it. I'm not completely sure. And then even on top of that, it depends, because this looks like it was translated. I can't see the original Irish in there. The problem is as well is if you don't have the original Irish next to it, you have to then question why the original Irish isn't next to it. Because what's the writer trying to hide here? Because you always find when you have a really good translation next to the original language, that even on top of that, it's still an interpretation, because English is so limited in expression. So I always push to find a source that has the original language next to it, so then you can put together your own interpretation, your own picture of what's happening. I always like to highlight that because that's so important, especially when you're dealing with medieval history, where we're just blatantly making it all up. It's all just made up. Right. I think I am finished there waffling. I'm going to sneeze as well in a bit. So with that, lads, Slán Ghália, see you. Goodbye. Bye, 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 bye.